ujaran kebencian, nah radikalisme, terorisme, ini adalah masalah-masalah yang serius yang harus kita hadapi. Kalau hoax kan kita bisa ada melakukan cross check, ya kan? Melakukan cross check, oh ini hoax ini aslinya kayak gini. Nah tapi kalau yang ujaran kebencian kan memang itu ada satu statement yang bisa menyulut permasalahan di masyarakat dengan memang tujuannya adalah untuk menciptakan kekacauan, apalagi menyentuh hal-hal yang berbau sara, suku ras, agama antar golongan. Ini yang menurut saya yang harus kita antisipasi. Dan secara regulasi sih kami sudah menyiapkan regulasinya. Jadi kalau sudah mengarahnya sampai kepada ujaran kebencian yang bisa mendatangkan perseteruan di antara masyarakat, kekacauan, ya kita bukan hanya memblokir, tapi kita juga melakukan penangkapan. Dan pastinya kita ingin Indonesia memiliki demokrasi yang berkualitas. Dengan tadi dengan para pemainnya itu ya menjaga etikanya, para yang berkontestasi maksud saya, masyarakat pemilihnya juga harus mulai dewasa. Ada hal-hal yang tidak perlu ditanggepin, gak usah ditanggepin, hal-hal tidak perlu di-sharing, gak usah di-sharing. Nah, untuk itu kita juga ada kerjasama dengan para platform digital. Mereka punya komitmen yang sama-sama ingin menjaga kualitas demokrasi di Indonesia, termasuk platform-platform gede. Bagi mereka tidak ada untungnya suatu negara di mana mereka menjalankan usahanya kacau. Kan mereka juga tidak akan pro yang namanya ujaran kebencian. Dan mereka juga punya suatu tim menunjuk beberapa pencari fakta fact checker. Tapi kalau begitu politik ya biarkan. Jadi biarkan juga ada kedewasaan dari para peserta pemilu yang lagi berkonsultasi, dan juga masyarakatnya juga mulai juga teredukasi. Jadi kayak nonton bola, pemainnya tahu aturan mainnya, penontonnya juga happy waktu menontonnya. Habis kalah menang itu ada hal biasa, paling kita bicarakan di warung-warung kopi, gimana sih pertandingan kemarin, habis itu ya kita move on kan. Nah ini harusnya kedewasaan itu yang kita ingin punyai di Indonesia.
What kind of negative content, right, that we're looking for, right, that we're talking about, because like the same kind of content, right, a lot of time can be positive and negative, depends on the context, right, and also sometimes a very negative content, right, now, right, maybe no longer a negative one when the time pass by, right. This information, for example, fake news, some of this information or like so-called like fake news can be very, very dangerous, right, during a certain period of time. But if it past that period, it is like no use, right. For example, some disinformation or fake news that like targeted maybe like political campaign, right, spreading around the false information about particular politician, for example, right. I think these information are designed to work in that particular period before the election, right. But once like the time it's like beyond the election period, right, post election, yeah, it's still false information, but the harm will be different, right. It will do more harm before the election, right. I think probably we need some mechanism that is like transparent enough, like of course, right, and with rule of law, like to deal with this, right, and have to deal with it like in fashion that like quick enough, right, like rapid response basically, right, because like if this information in the end hits the road, right, it will create like a lot of danger, right, so you have to respond quick enough, unless it's like no use. But of course there's another category of information, right, that okay, like people actually have a bad intention and want to do harm, right. So both of them are false information, but to deal with it, how to deal with it, right, because like if you're going to have a law that like strictly right, prohibit, right, any false information without looking at the intention, right, and you're going to criminalize this expression, I think journalists will be in a very difficult situation to do any work. So what we're going to combat with is actually not false information. We combat the bad intention, because there's a lot of cases that like people with good intention can mistakenly, right, distributing false information. So how to deal with this? I don't think like criminalizing these acts will be helpful for the society, because it will prevent the flow of information. It will prevent a lot of good information to be circulated. So in order for you to actually like, you want to limit the false information, but the consequences of this is like you also going to limit the good information as well.
I think the internet is able to self-police itself. Of course, there are extremes. Sometimes if people go into cyberbullying, or if they go into areas where they threaten the safety and the security of the country, there are sufficient laws that the government that are already available, which the government can use to deal with such threats, to deal with such cyberbullying, to all of which I give my support. But I think laws and rules which are too onerous for the ordinary citizens to keep, then it becomes very troubling, because you silence a large majority of people from speaking up on the issues. And when you do that, you drive the issues underground. And when you drive the issues underground, it becomes that much more difficult, even for the government, to police such issues. So I think the internet is that's the main reason why the internet as a platform, should be as open as possible, for as many people to come in and participate and give their views. And the internet community, I feel, is largely able to police and monitor itself. There are many different views in society, right? What is the view of one person or one group of person may not necessarily the view of another person or another group of person. And very often in the physical society as well, people have arguments, they have debates, they have disagreements. So the internet is no different, right? Because the internet is a reflection of the physical community, of the world that is around us. So it is inevitable that when issues crop up, there will be all sorts of different views. And I think how the internet polices itself is when someone, let's say, hey, we don't want too many foreigners in Singapore, or makes a xenophobic rant. You have another group of people who come out and say, hey, that's racist, or hey, that's xenophobic, and in that sense, they're able to moderate themselves. Sometimes things do degenerate into cyberbullying, just like in the physical world, right? Sometimes when an argument gets too heated in the real world, sometimes it can get to fistfights. I mean, the same do happen in the internet world, the world of the internet. Of course, you can't actually have a fist fight in the internet world, but people do go into shouting matches, they do cyberbullying, they can go and dig out all the information of the person to shame that person or whatever. But there are rules in society, laws in society to deal with such extremes like cyberbullying or terrorism or so on and so forth. I think Singapore they have been trying to enforce, they've been trying to put more laws in the cyberspace. I mean, there are certain legislative changes which are coming as well, which the government has said will come. There is one that was put in place, I think, 3 years ago in 2013, or 5 years ago, perhaps. And there was a lot of opposition for that, even from the media giants, right, like from Facebook and Google and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we have to see how else they will tighten the screws on the cyberspace. And of course, I think even the government is aware that when you tighten the screws too much on cyberspace, you affect entrepreneurship. Because not only is the internet important for activism, the internet is also important to for entrepreneurship to thrive. So, which is why it's important for the internet to remain as free as possible.
I'm also chairman of the advertising body in Singapore. Then in fact helped develop the social media advertising guidelines. So what happens is that we expected the social media advertising guidelines to be necessary to actually increase advertising in that space. And the reason is that, right, at least at the time before the guidelines came in, there were no rules. So basically you cannot trust the social media advertising actually. It was a crisis. Some advertising proved to be a problem, and in that period, all social media advertising was suspended for 3 months. Yeah, so the industry could see this is what happens when the advertising guide cannot be trusted. That your budget froze to zero, dropped to zero. So then we told them, hey, we have this guide we're thinking about, and so they came to meet us and talk about it, and they were ready to implement the rules, because without the rules, you can see that the results will be very bad for them. And in fact, after that, I think before the rules, we had consultation, of course, and before the rules came in, they had another episode, and the budget was suspended for 1 month at a time. So you can see the negative result of not having guidelines. But having said that, the guidelines are really, really mild. The main thing is disclosure, because social media is very hard to kind of police. Our approach is self-regulation, meaning that the industry will regulate the industry. In this case, the main thing was that you disclose that you are advertising. So far, we've been quite well received. We had a trial run for a year. We put a guidelines. We ran it for a year. We held seminars to educate people about this, and we haven't had major issues. So it's been running quite well. Yeah. Of course, there will be some in the social media space, the bloggers, but these tend to be so-called influencers. Yeah. There's some of them. There's one really well-known blogger, Wendy Cheng. She's really well-known for that. And that's like a full-time job. And yeah, they subscribe to the advertising guidelines. Yeah. It certainly helps them. They can see it helping them.